أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وخاتم النبيين والسيد المرسلين بالقاسم محمد. وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين. ولعن الله الدائم على أعدائهم أجمعين من ليلتنا هذه إلى قيام يوم الدين. To begin the majlis tonight, I would like to direct my heart and ask you to all direct your heart and attention to the personality of Imam Hussein alayhi salam and the noble companions who are buried in Karbala. Let us send our salam to them as a means of attracting Allah's special attention to this gathering. Assalamu ala al-Husayn وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. عظم الله أجورنا وأجوركم بمصابنا بالحسين عليه السلام. May Allah reward you for your efforts in mourning for Imam Hussein alayhi salam. We're very thankful to Allah Ta'ala for inviting us to this majlis of Imam Hussein, one of the greatest scholars of the previous generations in recent times. Sayyid Qadi Tabatabai, the instructor of many great scholars, including Allama Tabatabai and Ayatollah Behjad, he used to say that you should try to have remembrance of Imam Hussein and mourning for Imam Hussein alayhi salam at least once a week. Even if it's 2 or 3 people, but you should try to remember him at least once a week. And when it comes time for Muharram, from the beginning of Muharram to the day of Ashura, you should remember him every day. Because in doing so, there are many of your affairs that are locked up, they can be unlocked, and your problems can be solved by attending and participating in these types of gatherings. And his student, Allama Tabatabai rahmatullahi alayh, would say that there are only 2 ways for somebody to reach the higher levels of proximity and awareness. One of them is by doing the ziyarah of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, and the other one is by doing tawassul to Imam Hussein alayhi salam in these types of gatherings. And he would say that even the black cloth that they put up in these types of halls, that these will be a source of intercession for us on the Day of Judgment. So we pray that Allah Ta'ala looks at our intentions which are sincere, and He accepts our efforts, and He crowns this gathering with His special blessings and the special attention of the Imam of our time. Please recite salawat. Throughout the course of the previous evenings, we had the opportunity to look at the concept of injustice and justice with inspiration from Imam Hussein alayhi salam's mission and his struggle. And we've looked at it from many different angles, whether it be the interaction with people of injustice, whether it be trying to identify what is the greatest act of injustice, and other perspectives as well. When we talk about interaction with others, there's one time when we discuss what effect that interaction is going to have on us. And that's something that we had a chance to address in the previous night. But there's another perspective when you look and see how is it that you are supposed to interact with others? How can you influence others? And that's what I'd like to focus on this evening. And as a focal point for our discussion, I want to first quote a verse which appears at the end of Surah An-Nahl. It's a verse that I'm sure all of the lovers of the Quran are familiar with. Allah Ta'ala says, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون. Allah Ta'ala commands you towards justice, and He commands you to have ihsan, and He commands you to take care of the near ones and the orphans, and He prevents you from injustice, and He prevents you from sinfulness. Perhaps you may be amongst those who remember. And this verse contains some very, it's a wide-ranging verse, which gives us a very practical prescription, both on an individual level and on a societal level, of how Allah wants us to operate. But you could say that to sum up, Allah in this verse tells us and commands us towards justice in everything that we do, and He prevents us and prohibits us from committing acts of injustice. And this verse was often quoted by the Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam. For example, we're told according to reports, that when our Prophet used to recite his sermons, he would end by reciting this verse. It's kind of like a summation of everything else that he would like to convey to the people. What I'd like to do tonight is to focus on the first two parts of that, where Allah says, إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَأْمُرُ بِالْعَدْلِ وَالْإِحْسَانِ. Allah commands you towards justice and towards ihsan. A lot of times, ihsan is translated as doing good. So Allah commands you towards being just and doing good. But according to some of the commentaries of the Quran by some of the greatest commentators, they explain that ihsan is actually something which guides us how to interact with others on a superior level, in a way which is more fruitful than just on the level of justice. So let me explain what ihsan actually means, and then we'll talk about its relationship to justice, and then we'll talk about some of the applications of that in our lives. Allah Ta'ala, in many verses in the Quran, He mentions this concept of ihsan. And ihsan refers to doing something in the best way possible. In one of the ahadith reported from our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he says that try to do ihsan in everything that you do. Every single action that you perform, try to do it not just in a way where you're doing wajib and staying away from haram, or doing halal and staying away from haram, but do it with ihsan. And then he gives an example. He says that when you go and you take an animal to the slaughtering house and you're about to slaughter it, then before you do so, then make sure that you give the animal some water. Make sure that the instrument that you're going to be using to do the cutting, that you've sharpened that blade, so that when the cut is made, it is done in a swift way. Make sure that when you actually do that cut, that you do so in a way which is fast, right? Not something that is sort of delayed. Make sure that once you do it, that you don't move the corpse of the body. Let the life exit it, and then you go ahead and you move it. Make sure that when you do it, then there is no other animal which can see this happening, nor can it see the other animals, and so on and so forth. All of those are present in the traditions of the Ahlul Bayt. They teach us that when you want to slaughter an animal, you think about all these other things as well too. And it's something which is quite amazing actually, because if you look at it in a very utilitarian way, like pragmatic, you're like, well, what's the difference, right? Okay, this animal, it's alive right now. In a matter of a few minutes, it's going to be dead. So why would I need to treat it in this way and take all these extra measures? Some of them are very time consuming. Imagine, just as a side point, in today's economy of like mass production, when they want to do this type of thing, they build factories and they build like these conveyor belts and then they hang up the animals and they want to do it very fast, right? Do you think they have time to do this type of special things, like this type of ihsan? But this is what our Prophet calls us to do. And is it wajib to do these things? No. But it is something which leads to a higher level of operation. Like when you want to achieve this goal of having this animal, and being able to then have dinner and whatnot, then there's one way you do it, and you take it just a very, okay, what I gotta do, what's the basic sort of thing, and another time you look and see how can you make it be done in an excellent way. That same concept of doing things in an excellent way applies to everything else that we do as well. There's one famous hadith which is reported in both the books of hadith of the Ahlul Sunnah as well as the Shia as well, where the Jibreel alayhi salam appears in the form of a human being, and he came to the Prophet and he asks him some questions. And of course this was in order for the people to learn. So one of the things he asks him is, what is the meaning of ihsan? Okay, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says to him, say salawat please. So he says to him that ihsan is for you to worship Allah as if you can see Him. And if you cannot see Him, then you should know that He sees you. Now, I'm sure that you've heard this tradition narrated before. I wonder if we've gotten a chance to ponder upon it. It's something which is an extremely rich and very, one of those ahadith which you can really, really take a lot from. In this hadith, there are at least two levels of awareness that are referred to where somebody can reach and worship Allah at those levels. One of them is the level where it's as if they can see Allah Ta'ala. And another level is where they cannot, it's not as if they can see Allah, but they are aware that He is seeing them. And in that, there's something we can practically take, just as a side point, that when we get a chance, or when we can, when we have the opportunity to do so, when we're not so busy with other things, especially when we are worshiping Allah, let us just have this come to our minds, that we are in the presence of Allah. The entire world is in the presence of Allah. And that itself is a type of awareness which can really change the quality of everything that we do, especially the acts of worship that we perform. Now, going back to this topic of ihsan, here the Prophet is talking about worshipping, but it's a higher level of worship. It's a worship which has more quality to it. So one time you can talk about slaughtering an animal, and you can do so in a way where you're observing these extra etiquette, and that becomes like the most beautiful and excellent way of doing so. And there's another time where you're talking about the acts of worship and all those things that we do to strive to get closer to Allah. And the Prophet is saying that even worshipping as well, there's ihsan in that as well too. One time you talk about a level of just like, what's the bare minimum you need to do in order to get it correct. Another time you say, well, what if you want to actually have this be a source of elevation and proximity and spiritual cleansing? So that's when you talk about those type of things. Now, that same concept of ihsan is something that has been applied to the relationships that we have to other people, with other people. There's one time when you describe relationships on the level of huquq and rights and responsibilities. And you say that, okay, well, I'm in this relationship, this is the way that, these are the rights that I have on you, and these are the rights you have on me, and we have to make sure that we're always fulfilling these rights. And if you are going to be somebody who goes against my rights, then I'm going to take you to account for that. Why? Because that's what justice calls for. Justice calls for rights to be observed, putting everything in its proper place, observing the rights. In a society, when you're trying to run things in a way where there's order, there's system, right? When you have a government, when you have let's say, people's like property rights and companies and all that, you do need to have this type of approach where everything is like legal, you have rights and responsibility and whatnot. But what I want to talk about tonight is not at that level. What I want to talk about is the personal interactions that we have with individuals, whether it be in our family, whether it be with our friends, whether it be with our coworkers, whether it be with the random person on the street. How is it that what are we called to do? Okay, and what I want to use an analogy that has been used by some of our ulama to describe this concept. They say that when you want to build like a building out of bricks and mortar. Okay, like let's say you want to. I've never done this. I've never built. I've never been in construction, right? But of course, you see this happening where people want to build something. So let's say you want to do it really old school. So you get a bunch of bricks, right? And you start laying the bricks one on top of another, and then you build like a wall, and then you build a wall over there, and build a wall over there. Okay, now the bricks are the fundamental component of this building that you're making, correct? However, there's something that's missing there, right? It's not enough just to have the bricks. You need the mortar. You need like the sticky paste that's going to link all these bricks together. It's something which is soft. It's something which is gooey. It's not the thing which is going to keep the that hurricane that's coming through or the tropical storm coming through. It's not going to be the thing that keeps the building standing. It's the bricks. But that is also necessary as well. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to have that building. So some of the ulama have used this concept. It's a powerful concept. It's a beautiful concept to explain that when it comes to the relationships that we have, if you want that relationship to actually hold together and to be successful, you need to be looking at it at a higher level. Beyond just like, well, what's my rights and what's your rights? You did wrong to me, I did wrong to you, tit for tat, that sort of thing. Please recite salawat. I'll give you an example of a tradition from the Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam where one of the companions asks the Imam, he says, Ma haqqul mar'ati ala zawjiha. What is the right of a wife upon her husband? But then the companion is asking more than that. He says, Alladhi idha fa'alahu kana muhsinan. That if which he performs that right, he will be a muhsin. He'll be doing ihsan in that relationship. So the Imam alayhi salam explains, he says that, well, it's her right that he takes care of her, he provides the needs for her, he gives her the clothing that she needs, and also, if she does something out of ignorance, then he forgives her. Now, this last part here is very important, because one might say that, okay, you've done something wrong to me, right? In some way, there's some right that I have, you've trampled that right. Therefore, I have to demand my haqq. Okay, this is where there becomes a struggle between adl, where you do things on the level of rights, and ihsan, where you say that, there's another approach that I can take. And here the Imam ﷺ says your approach should be forgiveness. So we can take this concept and apply it to our interactions with other people, especially with mu'mineen, especially in the family. That if we want to go to the higher level and to have that type of like mortar in the bricks, the thing which really seals a relationship and keeps it enduring and lasting, then we have to look at doing acts of ihsan and having an ihsan approach towards our relationships. And what that means are things like having patience, like being forgiving, like trying to do things at an excellent level in terms of the type of communication that we have. It means like going the extra mile to look beyond someone's faults and look at their positive qualities. It means having a sense of humility and not trying to always sort of assert one's own identity in these relationships, and many other types of things. Let's look at a few examples, a few practical examples of how to apply this concept. One of them is when it comes to the concept of interaction with the people of injustice. We talked about this a few nights ago, but I wanted to complete that discussion. What we talked about that night is that Allah in the Quran tells us, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم ولا تركنوا إلى الذين ظلموا. Do not have a love in your heart. Don't be impressed by, don't incline towards somebody who is a person of injustice in your heart. And that type of injustice has been understood to mean any type, whether somebody is doing injustice against themselves because they're habitual sinners, whether they be people who are hypocrites, whether they be people who, are oppressors of others. It's not allowed for believers to have a level of closeness in their hearts which would allow them to be affected by their relationship with those people. Now, on a practical level, in our society, we're always dealing with people who are committing acts of injustice. Sometimes it's our co-workers, sometimes it is even our family members, right? So how do we apply this concept of ihsan when it comes to dealing with these people? Well, it's very interesting. If you go to the traditions of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, they emphasize that even if you are interacting with somebody who is operating at a different level than you are, their understanding of what's right and wrong is different than yours, then as long as it's not going to be counterproductive to the greater cause, then the approach that you should take is one of ihsan. So for example, there's a tradition which is reported from Nabi Sulaiman, like the Prophet Sulaiman, the Ahlul Bayt are reported from Nabi Sulaiman. Nabi Sulaiman, as you know, was somebody who could speak the language of the birds. So one day, he's watching the hoopoe bird. Hoopoe is the hudhud. It's mentioned in the Quran. And he sees that when the hoopoe bird goes and it was flying around and it was flying with the eagle and the falcon. Now the eagle and the falcon are birds of prey. They actually prey on the hoopoe bird. But Nabi Sulaiman was amazed to see that when it interacted with these birds, it did so in a very special manner. Like it was very careful. It had a lot of etiquette, a lot of sort of care in its approach to them. So he asked the bird, he says that, well, I saw you do this, why were you doing that? He says that somebody who takes this type of approach, of having a sense of tolerance for others where they're at, then their life is going to be easier. Now, there's an important point to make here is that when we talk about tolerance, it's not the tolerance which is condoning sin. It's not a tolerance which allows somebody's heart to be influenced and impressed by others. But it is a tolerance of well, after all, what are we trying to achieve? What's the end goal? This is something which happens all the time in families, where let's say there's somebody who decides to take a different path. Now, how is it that you're going to deal with that person? What is your end goal? What do you want to achieve? So ihsan comes up when it comes to in one of the ahadith which is reported from Imam Sadiq alayhi salam. He says that every time you interact with somebody, you should do so with the sense of tolerance and compassion. Even he says if you meet somebody from the Ahlul Kitab and you sit with them, he's just giving an example of somebody who disagrees with you, has a different approach. Even if you disagree with them, that when you sit with them, make that sitting an excellent sitting. Meaning that it's your responsibility at this time to have ihsan. Right? You understand that, okay, you could just take things at the level of oh, well, this person's like that, I'm like this, let me just make it, just the bare bones in terms of having, just this interaction take place. But the Imam says that no, make it be an excellent sitting. So, whether it be with interaction with the people of Dhulm or whether in our families. Now, let me give you another example is when it comes to raising children and being in a position of doing tarbiyah with others. So this is a particularly sensitive relationship that Allah puts us into, where we are in a capacity where we can influence other people. It comes up for parents, it comes up for teachers. The concept of ihsan is extremely important when we do so. Why? Because there's one time when you could say that, okay, you can look at things and say that, okay, well, these are the red lines, and this is, let's say that you're a parent and there's a child and they're, let's say, going on a path that you're not happy with. So you take an approach which is to crack down on them. You say that, okay, well, you're going in a path that you shouldn't be, therefore I want to be harsh with you, I'm going to interact with you in this way. Now, that type of approach is not looking at it from the perspective of ihsan. Ihsan says that, look, my goal in terms of helping others, I have a responsibility. I've been put in a position where I can influence others. Now, if I want to achieve that goal, what is the best way that I can take to do so? It's not by being forceful and harshful. It's by doing things in a step-by-step manner, by having a lot of respect, by setting expectations, but knowing that especially when a child grows, they are going to at times be doing things contrary to the expectations, but being able to forgive that and look past that and moving beyond that. There's a very important and useful tradition that's reported from Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. He says that the human soul, the likeness of it is like a horse like a wild horse that you're trying to tame. If you take things too fast, then you're going to be thrown off that horse. Right? It's going to rebel, and in fact, it might even end up being more wild than it was when you started. But if you want this to stick around and you want to want to be able to tame that horse, then you do things in a gradual manner. So this is extremely important when we're in the position where we have children, we have youth that we're interacting with. We have to be able to, on one hand, be very firm about the red lines. Right? There's no room for compromise when it comes to haram, when it comes to neglecting the duty. But at the same time, when it comes to the other things like behavior, when it comes to attitude, when it comes to helping out, when it comes to all these things that eventually we would like our children and the youth to be at, we have to be looking at an approach which is gradual, an approach which is positive in nature. A lot of times parents wonder, they say that, okay, well, how can I what is the strategy they can take? Because it happens that our children do things which are contrary to our expectations. So what approach that we can take? One of the most effective approaches is to look at things from the perspective of what our child is meant to achieve and how we can make sure that when we're trying to point out things that they're doing wrong, we do so in light of understanding what they ought to be at. I'm going to give you an example right now. The human being is created for perfection. So when it's the case that somebody is falling short of perfection, there's one time you can say that, oh, you are a loser. You're doing these things. I'm disappointed with you. I'm going to punish you. There's another time when you can say that you are somebody who I have high expectations for because you're a human being. You're supposed to be the representative of God. You're supposed to be the perfect mirror for all of perfection. Why is it that you have fallen short of that? Why is it that I don't see you achieving your full God-given potential? I'm surprised that you took this step and you did this thing. That type of approach is much more effective. There was once a young man by the name of Ali. It's a story which is told frequently, but it's a good story. I really like this story. There's a man named Ali. He was a young, like a teenager type of guy. And he was really struggling, right? He was into the latest fashions. He wasn't very much into the worship of God. And his parents were worried about him. He was kind of known in the town for being somebody who was sort of tending towards irreligiousness. And he was living in the city of Najaf, and it just so happened that one time, he came across Sayyid Ali Qadi Tabatabai, the same scholar that I mentioned at the beginning of the speech. And Sayyid Qadi happened to recognize him. He knew him through different family ties. So he greets him and he starts talking to him. And then, as he's sort of departing, Sayyid Ali Qadi Tabatabai has one comment for him, because he also saw himself as being responsible for the tarbiyah of this young person. Right? In some way he could influence him. Now, what does he tell him? He says they happen to be standing in the proximity of the shrine of Imam Ali alayhi salam. So he tells him, Ali, there's one thing I want to say to you. Your name is Ali, and that's Ali. Now you go and see, how are you in relation to him? That's it. Okay, that one statement. And this one advice from Sayyid Qadi Tabatabai led to a complete transformation in the life of Ali. And he abandoned his previous sort of habits. He started to be inclined towards the worship of God. And eventually he became known as the famous Sheikh Ali Zahid, Ali Az-Zahid. Like he actually took on the title of Az-Zahid, the one who is, not attached to the world. And even now there are people who go to his grave and they seek blessings of God from the grave, because he's somebody who was quite renowned in his life. Now that is the story of an individual, but the concept can be applied when we're interacting with others, of rather than taking an approach of always criticizing, of always like pointing out what's wrong, look at it from this perspective, that this is the expectations that Allah has for you. This is what He created for you. This is what you can achieve. And acknowledging the positive things that they're doing and praising them for that. And if they happen to fall short, then it's not that, oh, you are a loser and you're this, but rather it's that, well, this is the expectation that we had for you. I'm sorry to see that you're not fulfilling that expectation. Inshallah, that's one piece of practical advice that we can apply when we're dealing with the young people. If I can ask you to recite salawat, please. I would like to offer one more example of ihsan in family life, and then inshallah we'll be moving to the masaib portion. May Allah reward you for your patience. These majalis are rare opportunities for us to all gather together, and people are thirsty for reminders and for knowledge. And so sometimes, even despite the heat, despite being tired after a long day, it's worth being patient. Inshallah, maybe there's a lot of barakah, even more than we can realize. One of the areas that we as a community need to really work on as a whole, and I'm speaking to everyone, not any individual, as a whole, is in building stronger families. If you look at the typical state of families in our communities, and you look at the ideal that has been set by the Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam, and you look at the type of interactions that they used to have in their family, you feel that there's a lot that's missing. One of the major causes for why even we see that the faith isn't being conveyed to the next generation, it's because of not having a strong family environment. And when young people don't feel that the home is their safe haven, then of course they would like to find a safe haven somewhere else. What is one of the cornerstones of having a strong family life? It's the relationship between a husband and a wife. And this topic of ihsan, it's something which very much is a key to being able to solve a lot of the problems that appear within the family. Because ihsan means that when one spouse is in some way being, in some way either violating the rights of the other spouse, or they're bothering them, or they're annoying them, or they have some faults, ihsan means that rather than taking an aggressive approach, rather than responding to bad with bad, we respond to bad with good. We respond to bad with forgiveness. We respond to bad with overlooking. We respond to bad with love. And even though it might seem counterintuitive, especially at the moment, especially when something's happened and we feel that how could they do that to me? It might seem counterintuitive to respond with good. Actually, if we look at the way human beings operate, in many cases, responding to bad behavior with good, with ihsan, with beauty, with compassion, it's actually going to lead to a better outcome at the end. There are many times when people would come to the imams with their problems, and sometimes they would have family problems as well. And they would say that, okay, look, this is my spouse and they're treating me like this. And they would tell them, well, if you can't just work it out, then be patient. Forgive them. Overlook it. They would tell them about the reward for somebody who does so. In hadith, it's quite amazing that somebody, for example, if there's a husband who is patient over the bad akhlaq of his wife, then his reward will be the reward of Nabi Ayyub alayhi salam. Nabi Ayyub was somebody who faced a lot of difficulties in his life. When there's a wife who is patient over the bad akhlaq of her husband, then her reward will be the reward of Asiya, the wife of Fir'aun. Right? She had the biggest tyrant as her husband. And I know that brothers and sisters have heard these traditions before, but we need these reminders. The way that family life works, and especially in the busy life that we live, oftentimes we forget about the higher akhlaq that we are called towards. Because we look at things in a very limited perspective. We see that, okay, right now, here and now, this person has done this to me. I have to respond with anger. I have to see what I can do bad to them. It's actually a disease where what happens is that, let's say one of the spouses, they do something wrong, so the other person tries to figure out how they can do something wrong to kind of hurt them. And then it's sort of like this war then, like, okay, you threw an arrow, now I'm gonna fire a gun. You fired a gun, now I'm gonna drop a bomb, right? And then that becomes like, and now usually what happens is that after a while things get patched up, right? And then things go along, but that damage has taken place. The children have also sensed that as well. And to go and repatch that again, it's sometimes very difficult. Why not avoid that in the first place? Again, ihsan doesn't mean that you don't take into account adl at all and you ignore the boundaries. No, there are boundaries, there are red lines. It's not the case that, for example, one spouse can tolerate the behavior of another spouse where it's causing them to commit haram. It's causing them to not be able to do their wajibat. That's not allowed. But reality is that there will be faults and there will be difficulties. Ayatul Bahjat, in one, I believe it's from Ayatul Bahjat, he says that a relationship with, when you marry somebody, you're not marrying a perfect human being. And just like you have a rose which has so much beauty to it, so much incredible beauty to it, it also has thorns as well. And so when you are interacting with your spouse, you should know that at times you're going to be seeing those thorns. And the thorns are going to hurt as well too. But that doesn't mean that the beautiful part of the rose is not there. There's one time where a lady came to Ayatul Bahjat and she complained about her husband's bad akhlaq. It's very interesting. So Ayatul Bahjat wanted to, explain to her this concept of ihsan and being patient, right? So he said that, let me tell you a story. So he tells us her story of this one wazir by the name of Asma'i. In the books of history, there's a lot of stories where Asma'i, he was a wazir of one of the khulafa of the Abbasids. But for some reason, he used to travel a lot and he came across a lot of different experiences in his life. So he tells her a story. I'm telling you this because I feel it's, the fact that a great scholar like him would give that as advice for family life, it's something that we can take note of. So Asma'i one day was traveling in the desert. He was hunting and he got kind of lost, and he ran out of food. So he's traveling in the desert and he's getting pretty thirsty and pretty hungry. So eventually he comes to this one sort of tent in the wilderness. And he seeks permission of the tent, the persons in the tent. It happens to be a young lady who's there. And, he says that, okay, I'm been hunting, I'm really hungry and thirsty, can you help me out? Give me some water. So she's hospitable, but then when he asks for some water, he notices that she's a little bit like sort of like a sense of anxiousness comes on her face. And she tells him, she says that, look, my husband hasn't given me permission to use the water for anything else other than those things he told me to. So I can't give you the water. I don't have rights over that. But I do have some milk, and I had saved that milk for my own lunch, and I'm going to give that to you instead, and I'll just skip lunch. So he gladly takes it from her. He drinks the milk, and he gets, sort of, at least he's not like dying. And then after some time, her husband comes back. And Asma'i, greets him, and then he's there for a bit. He's taking rest before he wants to move on. But he notices that this man is an ogre, right? The way that he's dealing with her is just terrible, right? She has patience. She is controlling herself. She's trying to show love. And here's this man, and he is just laying it on, and no respect and no regard. So after a time, he says that this is too much for me, and he just, seeks his permission. He leaves the tent, and he wants to bid farewell. And when he's going, he just has a comment for the lady. The man is doing something else, and he has a comment for her. He says that, I don't understand. He's treating you like this, and you're so patient. Like, how is this? So she tells him, he says that, look at, don't be a source of creating a conflict between me and my husband. The reality is that, yes, okay, I'm just paraphrasing here, that he is treating me this way. But after all, like, this world is short. We're here, sometimes we might be in a castle, sometimes we might be in a tent, sometimes we might be in the city, sometimes we might be in the desert. The point is that this world is temporary and the hereafter is our ultimate destination. And I am acting on a tradition that I heard reported from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where he says that Iman is of two parts. Half of it is patience and half of it is thankfulness. And so that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. Now, that story is illustrative. It can be misinterpreted. It can be used as a way of justifying ogreish behavior. It can be used as a way of justifying injustice. That's not what I intend to do at all. It's not okay for somebody to trample somebody's rights. They are trampling their rights in this world, but in the hereafter, they're going to be affected much more than even the person whose rights are being trampled. It's not okay to disrespect. It's not okay to just take somebody for granted. It's not okay to crush their personality. If we want to be taking lessons from Imam Hussein alayhi salam and justice, then we should be taking lessons of understanding that human beings have all been created for the purpose of being the khulafa of Allah on earth. And when we deal with mu'mineen, we should be dealing with somebody who is attached to Allah, right? Who has more hurma and more respect than even the house of Allah. And Allah has said in tradition that there is nothing which brings my punishment more severe than when somebody takes and tries to, gets into when they come and they attack one of my awliya, when they come and attack one of my mu'mineen, one of the believers. That's the gist of the tradition. So I don't mean in any way to justify that. That is in its own place. But when it comes to daily life, the reality is that it's not going to be perfect. The society we're in is one which says that, okay, if it's not going to work, then just leave it, just drop it, just move away. You know, assert your own rights, be your own person. Concepts of like forgiveness and kind of like, being sort of passing over something and looking aside and forgiving and all these type of things, they're sort of not given a lot of prominence in our society. But Islam calls us towards ihsan. It's a better way of living. It's something which leads to more peace in life, and something which definitely in our society, in our families, and in our communities, we have to be able to observe this higher level of interaction, which is known as ihsan. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Brothers and sisters, tonight we would like to, inshallah, go through the story of the martyrdom of a very special young person in Karbala, one of the outstanding youth and children of Karbala by the name of Qasim ibn al-Hasan alayhi salam. We're blessed tonight with the presence of many children, many youth, and I really admire their persistence, especially when I see them trying to listen to the lecture, trying to participate. It's really something which gives me a lot of joy and happiness. And I'm really glad that this community is one which puts emphasis on trying to cater to the needs of the youth, because they are our future. And Qasim alayhi salam is an example of somebody for everyone, for people who are young and for people who aren't young anymore, but they would like to aspire towards those good qualities that young people tend to have. Allah in the Quran says, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, ma lakum, O you who believe, what's wrong with you? When you are called to go forth in the path of Allah, ithaqaltum ilal ard, that you weigh yourselves down towards the earth. You just cling to the earth. This is something which can be applied to the context of, like, let's say when the Prophet was asking the Muslims to go towards jihad and to fight against the kuffar. But it's a general concept. When we're called to do something for the sake of Allah, sometimes we feel heavy towards that. We know, for example, that the effect of reciting prayers on time versus delaying them is the difference between the akhirah and the dunya. But yet we feel heavy and we're not inclined to do so. And sometimes we delay and delay until the last moment. That is a quality which tends to affect especially those people who are attached to the world. And typically that can happen with the older that somebody gets if they don't have a special program of spiritual development, if they're not actively working on their spirituality. But with young people, there's a quality that they have, that whatever they have from the dunya, typically when they know they have to leave it aside and they recognize that the truth lies in leaving it aside, then they can do so, and it's not difficult for them. It's an admirable quality, and we see this quality being reflected in Qasim ibn al-Hassan. Qasim was an orphaned boy at the age of 3. His father, Imam Hassan alayhi salam, was martyred when he was only 3 years old. And for 10 years, approximately, the only father figure that he knew was Imam Hussein alayhi salam. He was living in the house of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. He was subject to his teaching. He was raised by him. He would have seen the likes of Ali Akbar and Imam Sajjad alayhi salam as his own brothers. And so when Qasim alayhi salam is present on the night before Ashura and he sees Imam Hussein alayhi salam telling the companions that they are free to go, but those who will stay will definitely face Shahada, then he begins to get worried. What is the worry of Qasim? Is it something that he's concerned about the pain that others will face in the battlefield? Is it that he's concerned about his life and wanting to be able to attain of age and then live the life of a normal young person and what lies beyond? No, Qasim's worry is that others will be able to be given the blessing of martyrdom and he will be deprived of it. And so after this amazing gathering disperses, where the companions show their incredible loyalty to the Imam and their dedication to this cause, and none of them wavers even a bit, but rather they're strengthened with the knowledge that tomorrow will be their last day in this world, because they had already cut off their ties with the dunya. Qasim goes to his uncle, and he says to him that, "Oh my uncle, you mentioned that they will be attaining Shahada. What about me?" And his uncle has one question for him. He says, "Oh Qasim, what is death to you? How do you perceive death in this way?" And Qasim responds saying, "Ahla min al-asad." It is sweeter to me than honey. And then when Imam Hussein hears this from his nephew, he says that you too will receive Shahada tomorrow as well. And that is something that gladdens the heart of Qasim. As we're moving into the Masa'ib portion, let us ask Allah Ta'ala to make our hearts pure, to remove those attachments in our hearts that are preventing us from being able to soar towards Him. We are created for so much. We are created to be those people whose hearts melt at the remembrance of Allah. But we find that in reality we're so dragged down by the different glitter and glamour of this world. By the sake of Qasim, O Allah, please purify our hearts. Help us to remember Imam Hussein. Help us to bring tears to our eyes. Sallallahu alayka ya Aba Abdillah. Sallallahu alayka ya ibna Rasulillah. Sallallahu alayka ayyuha ash-shaheed wa ibn ash-shaheed. أيها المظلوم المقتول عطشانا Peace and blessings be upon you, O Master of Martyrs, O Ship of Salvation, O noble and pure soul, O innocent one, our beloved Imam Hussein, and upon the noble souls who are buried with you in Karbala. Peace and blessings be upon the children of Karbala. How much they must have had to endure on the journey to Karbala, and for those days and nights in Karbala. Peace and blessings be upon Imam Hassan and upon his children who were present representing him in Karbala. When Imam Hassan alayhi salam was poisoned so unjustly, this great Imam was somebody who was filled with patience. Imam Hussein alayhi salam comes to visit his older brother. He loved him so much, it was so difficult for him to see his condition as the poison had spread through his body. Imam Hassan alayhi salam notices Imam Hussein and his condition when he sees him. He says that, why is it that I see you like this, O my brother Hussein? He says, it's because of what I'm seeing is happening to you, O my brother Hassan. Imam Hassan alayhi salam tells him that yes, indeed, this is the poison, this is what they've done to me, but you should know, O my brother Hussein, La yawma ka yawmika ya Aba Abdullah. There is no day like your day, O Abu Abdullah. Imam Hassan alayhi salam might have been foreseeing what would happen on that day when even children will be shown no mercy. There comes a time on the day of Ashura when the men have all gone forward. One by one they valiantly fight and they so valiantly sacrifice for the mission, for the sake of Imam Hussein. But there comes a time when the only ones who are left are the children. Qasim ibn al-Hassan, who has seen one by one all those figures that he loved and cherished. Unique in particular scene at this time, Qasim is seen bending down, kissing the feet of his uncle Hussein. He's kissing his hands repeatedly. It's as if that Imam Hussein is finding it very difficult to give permission to this orphan to go to the battlefield. Maybe he's remembering how Imam Hassan had placed his son in his amana. Maybe he's thinking that what would my brother think if he would see his son now entering the battlefield with all these men? He's just a boy after all. Tears are streaming down the eyes of Imam Hussein. He embraces Qasim for a very long time. And after that, he gives him permission to go to the battlefield. Imagine the scene, my brothers and sisters. This boy who has not even reached of age. Where is he? He's entering a battlefield of men who are hungry and thirsty for war booty. They are armed to the teeth, but he cannot even have any armor that fits him. He's just wearing a long shirt. He's wearing sandals. One of the enemy soldiers by the name of Humayd says that when I saw Qasim, he was so beautiful as if it was a sliver of moon in the dark sky. There was light emanating from his face. But he was so young that he was wearing sandals and he bent down to fix one of his sandals. He was not somebody who was geared for war. He was just a young boy fighting against these men. But he is firm with the courage and he's firm in his mission as truth. And maybe they doubted him when they saw him initially, but when they heard his battle cry, they realized that this is a young boy, but his heart is stronger than the heart of many strong men. He cries out, "In tunkiruni fa'ana far'ul hasani." If you don't know who I am, son, Sibtun Nabi al-Mustafa wal-Mu'tamani. I am the grandson of the chosen one, the one who was given the trust and the divine trust. هذا حسين كالأسير المرتهن. This is Hussein. This is Hussein. He is like a prisoner surrounded from all sides. بين أناس لا سقوا صوب المزني. May Allah curse these people and never give them a drop of water to drink. The only concern that Qasim has is for the Imam of his time, for the oppression being done to his Imam, and fights valiantly against these men. There's one who made reports that there was one man next to me who says that I will be the one who takes him down. Humayd looks at him with surprise and he says that an attack a child? Maybe that man is thinking that I want to do something to particularly cause pain in the heart of Hussein. Let me go and take thought as the Imam of his time. He cries out, "Wa Amma! Oh my Imam Hussein, who is waiting and standing and seeing the events unfold, can no longer stand there. He rushes forward. He rushes forward to his nephew's side. In the process, the enemy soldiers come and try to aid their fellow soldier, and they end up trampling his body. There's so much commotion. There's a cloud of dust, but when it settles, look at the scene. It is a scene of the Imam of the time next to the body of his own nephew, and he is crying out. He's saying that it is very difficult for your uncle, that you have called him and it was too late for him to rescue. This is something which is very difficult for Imam Hussein to bear. History narrates that he takes the body and places it next to the body of his own son, Ali Akbar. For Qasim had the place and had occupied in his heart the position of his own son. When Imam Hussein alayhi salam has seen these events unfold, it is very difficult. He cries out, Allahumma ahsihim adada. Oh Allah, take account of what they have done. Oh Allah, reckon each one of them. Oh Allah, never forgive them for what they have done, because they have now slaughtered and killed his dear nephew, the pure boy, the son of Imam Hassan alayhi salam. Ala la'natullahi ala al-qawmi al-zalimin. وَسَيَعْلَمُ الَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا أَيَّ مُنْقَلَبٍ يَنْقَلِبُونَ. We ask Allah Ta'ala in His mercy, by the sake of Qasim ibn al-Hassan, to accept this majlis from us, to accept these tears that we have shed, to purify our hearts, to help us dedicate everything that we do towards His sake and towards the cause of the Imam of our time. May Allah hasten the reappearance of the Imam of our time. There are many people who are ill and they're facing problems. There are many mu'mineen. Oh Allah, by the sake of these majalis, grant them their hajat. There are many marhumeen of the people who are present here who are seeking to partake in the blessings of such gatherings. Oh Allah, let them share in the reward that comes from these gatherings. Oh Allah, there are many people who are oppressed in this world, whether they be locally or whether they be abroad, whether they be Sheikh Zakzaki achieve victory over the oppressors. وصلى الله على محمد وعلى آله الطاهرين.